appreciate your coming out. I realize that this is not ideal weather conditions to come out to a talk. It's also on a Friday when sometimes students have other things that are preoccupying them. So that suggests the dedication and the recognition that this is an important event, and I think that it is. Before introducing the speakers, I'd like to make two brief announcements. Your coming is a good idea because we do have lunch after this talk. And so if you would like to wait around, you'll get fed. I think well fed. And the other announcement is some of you I've noticed have picked up these handouts, some of you have not. If you have not, just raise your hand and Mike will has an extra supply of them, and so we'll pass those around. And obviously the topic of today's talk is the US-Korea Free Trade Agreement that was signed after a long period of negotiation. Sometimes fairly contentious negotiation, as I understand it, on both sides. I think reaching this agreement finally last December was a milestone in U.S.-Korean relations. It's something that is very important, and I don't know if this is politic to say, but I think that sometimes Korea does not get the attention that it deserves. It's an important part of East Asia. And I know everybody talks about the rise of China, worries about Japan, but Korea is right there in the middle, I might say, between China and Japan, sometimes in a rather uncomfortable position. And so certainly it deserves more attention than it's gotten. And one of the things that we at the Center of the Study of Asia are trying to do is to bring more attention to Korea. So this is hopefully just one of many Korea-oriented events. Our speakers today are first Mr. Won-kyong Kim, who is the Economic Counselor at the Embassy in Washington, D.C. He is, prior to coming to Washington, he served as Assistant Secretary to the President at the Office of the President in Seoul, and focusing on coordinating and advising on international economic and trade policies. From February 2006 until July 2007, Consular Kim was the director of the US-Korea Free Trade Agreement, KORUS-FTA negotiations. So he obviously has been involved in this work for a long time and is a real authority on this. He's also been head of legal services for international trade, director of trade strategies. He's also served as counselor at the Korean Embassy in Serbia and Montenegro. He received his BA in law from Korea University in Seoul, an LLM degree from the Georgetown University Law Center, and a master's degree in international public policy from the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, also located in Washington, D.C. I have some connection since I was an adjunct professor at Zeiss many years ago. And also with us today is Sean Connell, who is Executive Director of the US-Korea Business Council and Director, Japan and Korea, of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And he serves as the as Executive Director. Sean Connell manages all Council program and policy activities, including the US-Korea FTA Business Coalition, working closely with Council member companies and U.S. and Korean business organizations and the U.S. and Korean governments to advance the Council's agenda. I thank both of you for coming to Boston today. I am sorry we don't have better weather to welcome you, but I assure you by April 7th, opening day of the Red Sox, the weather will be better and we will win. So thank you very much for coming, and without further ado, let me turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's really an honor to be here and share the thoughts about the important topic that we all have together, which is Korea-US Free Trade Agreement. We have been taking the tour around the United States to talk about this issue for several months by now, sometimes together with Chamber of Commerce US businesses, and other interested parties. But this occasion is pretty unique to me because most of the time we're talking to people who are in the business. And we talk about commercial interest, business interest, and what's in it for them. But here at the university, and I can see most of our audiences are students and scholars, and I was wondering what your interests are going to be. And I assume that you are going to get some credit out of this, participating in this.
They will get wisdom.
Okay.
Which is more important than credit.
Okay, and I also understand that you're mostly international relations students.
I think most.
And I can also see that some of you are very familiar with Korea. Are you not? So I probably am going to do the basics of the Korea-US FTA, but some of this may be pretty boring to you. But let's get started. I have distributed either a packet or a slide printout. I'm going to go through the slide so that we can have a general idea of what the Korea-US economic relationship is like as of today, and also what the Korea-US FTA is about. Let's turn the first page over to the next, which gives you a graph titled as US-Korea trade balance. This slide and the next slide is to give you an idea of what kind of relationship the United States and Korea have as of today. Because there are so much misconception, misunderstanding about the relationship. If you read newspapers, listen to TV broadcasting, you will hear a lot of stories about the negative impact of trade on the U.S. economy, and it goes on like the United States has lost a lot of jobs because of more trade with Mexico under NAFTA, or more trade with China under what is called PNTR, Permanent Normal Trade Relations, which U.S. Congress passed in 2000. These criticisms, a lot of times, are not really based on the facts. These criticisms sometimes are generated by fear. But even beside that, I am going to argue that the US-Korea relationship is different from all of these relationships. And because of that, the US-Korea trade agreement is different in nature from other trade agreements that the United States has concluded so far. The first page shows you the trade balance between the two countries. As you can see, at the end of the third quarter of 2010, you can see our trade balance is very balanced. You can see $2.9 billion surplus in favor of Korea, meaning 2.9 billion deficit for the United States. But compared to almost $100 billion trade volume, this is a very balanced trade relationship. And especially compared to the U.S. relationship with other countries. Up until the third quarter 2010, the United States recorded $382 billion deficit around the world. Among them, China recorded $194 billion surplus, Mexico $46 billion, Japan and Germany $29 billion surplus vis-a-vis the United States. Korea recorded $2.9 billion trade surplus, meaning our trade relationship is very balanced. So having a trade agreement and more trade between the two countries is not likely to result in sort of surge of imports from Korea and worsening trade balance between the two countries. Next page. shows you the investment flow between the two countries. This investment does not include portfolio investment. This is about what is called FDI, foreign direct investment. And as you can see, from 2006, the Korean investors are investing more money into the United States. Previously, it was always the United States investors bringing more money to Korea, building factories and bringing new technology. Since 2006, Korean investors are putting more money into the United States, building factories. For example, well-known automobile company Hyundai and Kia have built factories in Georgia and Alabama, hiring thousands of American workers out there. So you can see what I'm trying to argue here is that the prevalent criticism of outsourcing of jobs to a lower wage countries, which is caused by more trade, does not apply here. Our relationship is more like Koreans are building factories in the United States instead of Americans are building factories in Korea. So we are bringing jobs to the United States instead of taking away jobs from the United States. So this is where we are in terms of trade and investment relationships. And let's take a look at where we stand in terms of aggregate numbers. The third slide is trying to show you the position that the United States is occupying in the Korean market. In 2000, as you can see, the United States was the largest trading partner for Korea. This lasted until 2003, but in 2003, there was a big change. Since then, China has become the #1 trading partner for Korea. And afterwards, the United States has fallen to the first place. The European Union has become a bigger trading partner for Korea, and Japan has become a bigger trading partner for Korea as well. So as of now, the United States is #4 largest trading partner for Korea. But this is not limited to Korea alone. In East Asia, you can see similar trends are happening throughout the East Asian countries. The United States is falling behind the other countries. This is not because U.S. export to East Asian region has fallen. This is because other countries has been doing more trade in a much faster fashion than the United States has been. So this indicates that the U.S. businesses, investors really need to work harder to compete with other countries. Part of the reason may be the U.S. has been pretty satisfied with the status quo. You have had a pretty robust economy depending on your domestic consumption and housing booming housing market. But outside of your border, the U.S. has been slow in terms of opening new markets for your businesses, and that has to be turned around now. The next slide shows you Korea's active in that regard. Some of you will be surprised to hear that 82% of Korea's GDP relies on international trade. The U.S. export occupies only 13% of U.S. GDP. But compared to that, you can imagine how reliant the Korean economy is on international trade. So we have been feeling for the last decade that unless we move forward, we're going to fall behind. But until 2005, surprisingly, Korea did not have any free trade agreement. So it was only the last 6 years we have been really active in terms of opening foreign markets and as well as our markets. Because otherwise, we felt that we cannot really survive in this competitive environment. So In 2005, we concluded our first free trade agreement with Chile. And we chose deliberately Chile as our first FTA partner because Chile was believed to be harmless to Korean farmers and Korean industry. As you can see, Chile is located on the opposite side of the globe from Korea. So their production cycle is the opposite. And we do not really compete in terms of industrial products. So we thought that this is a great test case for Korea's new efforts, new initiative to conclude FTAs. But since then, we have been very active. In 2007, as you know, we concluded a free trade agreement with the United States. And after that, we also concluded FTA with European Union. And the European Union agreement basically gets the same kind of treatment that our agreement provides, but that is moving much faster than the US agreement. European Parliament in Strasbourg passed the Korea-EU trade agreement on February 16th this month, just last week. So the EU agreement is scheduled to enter into force on July 1 of this year. We tried to conclude our agreement first and then implement the agreement first. So we concluded that in 3.5 years ago, but the Congress has been slow in terms of ratifying it. So we are still here without implementing or enjoying the benefits of the agreement. As you can see, we have also concluded trade agreements with ASEAN, 10 ASEAN countries, and Singapore, India, a big emerging market, and Peru and Chile. And also we are in negotiations with Canada, Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, and GCC countries. GCC countries are the Middle Eastern Gulf cooperation countries. So, turn to the next slide. Gives you a synopsis of what the Korea-US trade agreement is about. From the US perspective, it eliminates Korea's import tariffs on 96% of US industrial products within 4 years. This is the first time ever commitment that Korea has ever made. But after this, the EU agreement basically gets the same thing. And now EU is going to enter into force, which would give them a much competitive edge in terms of preoccupying the Korean market. You can easily imagine what kind of impact this is going to bring to the US economy. Currently, the average applied tariff that Korea imposes on the US exports is 11.2%. The United States is much liberal economy and imposing much lower level of tariffs on Korean exports at the rate of 3.7%. So eventually, all of these tariffs go down to zero. So you can imagine who's going to get more benefits out of this initiative. And also, Korean import tariffs on a lot of U.S. agricultural products will be gone. And also, the FTA utilizes many services sectors, including financial services, telecommunications, broadcasting, express delivery, and legal services. And this is particularly good news for students at this great institution, I believe, because you are going to engage in more value-added high-tech industries, I can see. So for example, the legal services market in Korea will be open to US firms 5 years after the entry into force of the agreement. So if the EU agreement enters into force, they get the same treatment. So from July 1 this year, 5 years after July 1 this year, the EU law firms will be able to establish their subsidiaries and hire Korean lawyers and do business in Korea. On the other hand, the United States law firm will not be able to do so. So that's another disappointing factor that you might want to considered. It also reforms a lot of non-tariff barriers and enhances transparency in Korea's regulatory system. Also enhances investment protection and strengthens IPRs. So when I give presentations like this, one of the questions that I get a lot of times is, so why are you doing this? You're giving out all these great benefits to US investors and exporters and in Europe. What are you getting out of it? Of course, we enjoy the lower tariffs. That's one thing. Although compared to the liberalization of the tariffs that we are imposing, it may be smaller, but we still get the elimination of the tariffs. But also, we see from the beginning, we saw this as sort of a comprehensive reform package for Korea's economy. We have lingering problems from our industrial era, and also we have lingering protection for our agricultural sector. Our agricultural sector is especially a big burden for Korea's economy in general, because generally speaking, the agricultural sector in advanced economies is supposed to occupy approximately 3% of the GDP and 3% of the population. In Korea, the agricultural sector occupies 2.6% of the GDP and 8% of the population. And that has been a great burden for the Korean economy in general, but as you can see, a lot of older generation farmers are reliant on government subsidies and government protection, so we cannot easily just let them go. So that was always a big issue in terms of pushing for trade agreements with other countries, especially a partner like the United States. Our agreement with other countries like India or ASEAN, we have a huge exemptions that we secure for our agriculture sector, because that's what our domestic political sector demands. But with the United States, that was not a reality. So we came to a comprehensive sort of reform package as well as the plan for elimination of the tariffs. So we were going to try to provide assistance to farmers and fishermen through a different channel to enhance their competitiveness and do sort of structural restructuring and reform these sectors through concluding the FTA as well. So this is going to be a big challenge. The Korean government understands that. But we also understand without going through these kind of changes, the Korean economy cannot maintain its competitiveness in the future. So it's a painful decision for the Korean government to take, and we have a lot of homework. The same kind of problem exists in Japan, as you know. The Japanese government has been, Japan has a much bigger economy, which is 5 times bigger than ours, but also has the same kind of problem. The agriculture sector and the free Daotian sectoral interest groups in their political system. So they have not been able to push trade agreements with other countries, which involves agricultural reforms. Recently, Japan is recognizing that without that kind of bold initiative, they cannot really compete in the global market. So they are trying to join what is called TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement that the United States is leading, and but to be able to do so, they need to reform their agriculture sector as well. So Japan is taking on the challenge as well. We are one step ahead of Japan, but we still have a big burden of reforming and assisting our aging farmers in the future. So this is what Korea-US FTA provides, and the impact of it is the aggregate impact of it is listed in the next slide. In 2007, the United States International Trade Commission, which is an independent U.S. government agency, estimated that the agreement will increase U.S. exports by $10 to $11 billion. Also increase U.S. GDP by $10 to $12 billion. On January 25th, President Obama, in his State of the Union speech this year, mentioned that Korea FTA will support at least 70,000 American jobs. So this is a general figure that we cite. And also, Senator Wyden from Oregon did his own calculation and published that Korea FTA has the potential to create about 280,000 American jobs. Korea, again, is going to have its own benefits, but this is what the United States is going to get out of this. So this is what I have to offer. If you have questions, remarks, I'll be happy to entertain. Thank you.
Sure. Well, thank you, Councilor Kim, and thank you, Dr. Fewsmith, and thank all of you for joining us here this afternoon. It's a delight to be back here in Boston. It's my first time in Boston and New England in quite some time, and always happy to come back to this area. I'd like to begin, and it's going to be hard to give a better summary of some of the compelling facts and figures in U.S.-Korea economic relations and why this agreement is so beneficial, what Councilor Kim said. But I'd like to start with a bit of an interactive exercise for everyone who's here, and we'll start with a show of hands. I'd be curious to know how many of you have traveled to South Korea before. Okay, there's a few of you. If I could maybe ask for a couple of volunteers, based on your visit to Korea, are there one or two words that best describe your impressions of the country? If you want to share a word, raise your hand. Anyone?
Go ahead. Fast.
Fast.
Lots of Korean words in the street, lots of Korean signs.
Mm-hmm.
They have tradition.
Okay. So fast, lots of science tradition. One reason I'm asking for this is just because it is very interesting in speaking with people, in business circles, in college circles, in Washington, and other states and cities around the country. What comes to mind when people talk about Korea, specifically South Korea? Sometimes I will say that in talking to people about Korea, I get asked which one. North Korea or South Korea, and often in the public consciousness it is North Korea that comes to mind. I'll share with you some of my earliest impressions of Korea, and this is before I went there. And by way of background, I'm from the Pacific Northwest, and often driving past jet manufacturing facilities, I'd see many new planes emblazoned with the Korean Airlines and ASEAN Airlines logo waiting for delivery, but made right there in the region. And also seeing rail cars go along the freight lines emblazoned with Hanjin shipping, Hyundai shipping, transporting agricultural and manufactured goods made in the U.S. To the ports to ship to Korea, and then Korean products shipped through U.S. ports to be transported all around the country. So in my personal experience, South Korea and trade have always been inextricably linked. And it's been interesting because I know that image is not necessarily one that everyone necessarily shares. But it is interesting in the years since trade negotiations between the United States and South Korea started on the trade agreement. As me and my counterparts have gone around the country talking with people about the bilateral business and economic relationship and what this agreement means and how it will be beneficial to U.S. workers and businesses and communities all across the country, what images people do have of Korea. And for the first person mentioned fast, I'll take a variant of that dynamic. is often a word that comes to people's expressions for people who have been there recently. Things move very quickly. The speed at which technology and innovation has developed there is astonishing. And I'll say that in of the visits I've been making to Korea over the last 6 and 7 years, there's something new and different every time, it seems. And it may not be the case, but it certainly feels that way in the best way. I'd like to start by explaining what our role is in relation to the agreements, where the U.S. business community sees this agreement and why it's of interest to us. And by way of background, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is headquartered in Washington, is the world's largest business federation. And when you put all of the members of the chamber together with their federation of associations, the network of state and local chambers all across the United States, as well as the more than 100 American chambers of commerce overseas, we represent the interests of more than 3 million members. So it's a very wide network. And I'll acknowledge my colleague Jeff O'Hara, who is the regional director for the U.S. Chamber covering all of New England states. And I'm delighted that Jeff could join us here today as well. Within the Chamber, we have a very robust international program of work because members have indicated that international trade is so important to growing and expanding their businesses and creating new jobs. And the US-Korea Business Council, which is one of a number of bilateral business councils close to the Chamber, focuses very specifically on the broader US-Korea economic and business relationship. And we're looking for the kinds of opportunities, the kinds of policies and other actions that will help increase the flow of trade and investment between the two countries, both U.S. exports to Korea and U.S. investment in Korea, as well as that will bring more Korean investment to the U.S. because, as Councilor Kim mentioned, in recent years it's expanded, and that's supported job growth and new economic opportunities in communities across the country. The FTA, to provide background, negotiations were first announced just over 5 years ago, in February of 2006, and the negotiations started that June. They were concluded in an astonishing 12-month period, on April 1st, 2007. I say astonishing because the agreement, if you go to look at it, and the text is publicly available, is more than 400 pages long. And I believe that's not including all of the individual tariff lines that explain all of the tariffs that will be removed under the agreement. But it's incredibly complex. It's one of the most comprehensive ever done, certainly by the U.S., and very groundbreaking in many ways. And this agreement was signed on June 30th, 2007, which was the final day that Trade Promotion Authority was still in place. And U.S. Trade Promotion Authority, for those of you who are not familiar with U.S. trade policies, is the authority under which a trade agreement can be sent by the President to Congress for an up or down vote without amendment on a fast-track time frame. That has lapsed, and actually at this point any trade agreements that are under negotiation would not be protected under the TPA and would be open to amendments as they go through the legislative process. So it's been about 3.5 years since the agreement was signed, and there's been some very good developments recently, which I'll get to in a moment. But right from the start, this agreement was of very deep interest to the U.S. business community for many reasons. First, because Korea is one of the most important and largest trading partners for the U.S. And for many years now, Korea has consistently been either the 7th or the 8th largest export market for U.S. manufactured and agricultural goods combined. It's also increasingly important as a destination for U.S. generated services. And the numbers have grown in just a couple of weeks ago. The new trade statistics for the U.S. for 2010 came out. And U.S. exports to Korea reached nearly $39 billion. This is a significant increase, about $10 billion over 2009 and even $4 billion above 2008 prior to the financial crisis. Korea exports to the U.S. also grew. And while we don't have the services figures for 2010 yet, or 2009, excuse me, the most recent services figures available, U.S. services exports to Korea totaled $12.6 billion in that year. And this is actually an area where the U.S. has a trade surplus with Korea. So there's, as Councilor Kim mentioned, it's a very balanced trade relationship, but also one that is growing and growing quite rapidly. It's also a business environment that it's not just the domain of large companies, but there are many smaller businesses, some very small, some a little bit larger, but certainly small, medium enterprises that do business with Korea and are being very successful in their business with Korea. One interesting anecdote I heard, just to provide an example, a few years ago, was a small company in the Midwest that had developed a cryogenic treatment by deep freezing to strengthen the resiliency of products. And one of the things that they were doing was golf clubs. And they specialize in golf clubs and a few other products. And one of their most important export destinations overseas was Korea. They said that Korea had been a phenomenal market for them. And there have been many other great stories that we've heard, and sometimes those stories don't necessarily get out as widely as they should. But the long story short is that there's deep interest in this agreement because not only was the relationship in terms of trade and business strong already, but a deep sense that also there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of potential to broaden that relationship, to open up both markets, and in doing so create more opportunities to grow jobs, to grow trade, and to increase the economic benefits. The agreement is often pointed to as by many in the business community as a model for future trade agreements because it goes so far and so comprehensive in tackling some very challenging issues in international trade, not just tariffs and duties on exported goods, but also non-tariff barriers, the regulations and standards, procedures, ownership rules that sometimes serve as behind the border limits to trade. And this agreement tackles many of those in some very creative ways that will be very beneficial. We sometimes call this agreement you look at it as a significant U.S. foreign policy success, not just because of the economic aspects of it, which are their own very significant, but because of what this could do to strengthen the overall relationship. And over the last couple of years, a number of leaders in both the U.S. and Korea have said the relationship is at its strongest point ever. There's very close cooperation between the U.S. and Korea, not just on challenges on the Korean Peninsula, but also in addressing global opportunities and challenges of shared interest. Responses to the global financial crisis provide one example. Humanitarian assistance, disaster relief. These are all some of the areas in which the U.S. and Korea have expanded their partnership and where Korea has taken on an increasing global role. And this is quite remarkable to me, in part because several years ago when I first started working with Korea, there were some disagreements between the two governments on certain areas related to the Korean Peninsula, other things. And there were some voices in both countries that were questioning, well, where is the alliance going? What is the future of the alliance? Since we've seen that the future was very bright. It could be even brighter. And while up until now, a lot of the nature of the U.S.-Korea relationship is focused on security, defense, ensuring regional stability and prosperity in Asia, there's also an opportunity to really deepen and broaden this relationship by further integrating the economies. So these are some of the aspects of the agreement that, in our view, make it so important and a very important priority. Just to provide a couple other details, for those of you from the state of Massachusetts, Korea is a very important business partner. It is the 9th largest overseas market for Massachusetts-made products. It is Korea's 10th largest trading partner amongst the U.S. states. And Massachusetts exports to Korea increased by 43% in 2010 over 2009. So there is a lot of business going on between Korea and Massachusetts. Korea is a burgeoning hotbed of high-tech and innovative products and research, as is Massachusetts. We've been talking with some companies who see some great potential and some great interest in that. And initiatives like this agreement will help, we believe, further increase these bonds and opportunities. Be very happy to take questions that any of you have about the agreement areas that are of interest to the business community about Korea in general. But I want to thank you once again for taking time out of your schedules on a Friday to meet with us today. Thank you.
Since we have an agreement to take some questions, let me open it up. I'm sure there must be some questions that are floating around in your minds. Somebody, Consul.
Oh, yeah, I have a question, because you said 43% of the exports are coming from Massachusetts, right?
They grew 43%.
Yeah. So what are the export products there from Massachusetts?
Well, some of the major projects, and is this in the pack? So we have a great list here, and specifically in 2010, the top Massachusetts exports to Korea included turbojet and turbo propeller parts, it's jet parts, and so this is a 2008 number, but in 2008 that value was $79.5 million. Getting into some broader statistics, looking at the category of machinery, in 2010 was $343 million, which is again a significant increase over previous year's totals. Some of the other top exports, again going back to 2008, because this is the more specific information we have, include machine parts, golf balls, medical devices, optical media, both for recording and for other uses, air coolers, air purifiers, a lot of electronic equipment, oscilloscopes, meters, LCD indicator panels, and a number of other products related to the healthcare technology sector.
This information sheet is included in your packet. This is titled as Massachusetts Economy Stands to Gain from the KORUS-FTA. On the back side of it, there is a list of the products. The top list is not limited to Korea, but Massachusetts export items to the world. This is here because we wanted to show you the potentials. Although currently Massachusetts is not exporting these items to Korea that much, because you're exporting these items to other countries, you have a great industrial base and you have the potential. When the tariff goes down, you will have more opportunity to export these items to Korea. The bottom list is the actual export items from Massachusetts to Korea as of now. So you can see the items that Sean mentioned.
Thanks for great talks. I have a question mainly for Consul Kim. It's on the negotiation between Korea, Japan, and for past pre-negotiation in your chat on FTA, so between Korea and China. How is the status of those negotiations? And related to this is how this KORUS agreement would influence negotiations in Southeast Asia.
Right, that's a great question. It's a very complicated interaction of foreign policy and commercial policy. Just to give you the facts first, our negotiation with Japan started in 2002 and then was stopped in 2004 because from our perspective, Japan wasn't able to commit to a complete agriculture package. Japan basically wanted to exempt almost 50% of its agricultural sector out of the agreement, and that was not something that we could really agree on. So at that point, the negotiations just stopped. We were talking about resuming the negotiations, but to be able to do so, again, as I mentioned, Japan needs to come up with a more comprehensive agriculture commitment and reform package. With China, we are in a pre-negotiation stage. We have concluded what is called government, industry, and academia study on the potential impact of the Korea-China FTA. We have concluded those, and then we have we held first round of government-to-government preliminary discussion September last year. This is just to talk about the structure of the potential agreement. Since then, we have experienced some difficulties in terms of our bilateral relationship after the North Korean attack on South Korean leadership, and also North Korean bombing of Won-kyong Island, a South Korean territory. China has not been fully supporting South Korea's position, and our relationship is in a state in which we cannot really make progress on FTA either. But I assume our relationship will get better with China pretty soon, and then we will resume the discussion on the FTA pretty soon. That's the fact. And how Korea-US FTA is going to influence these negotiations. Our ultimate trade policy goal is to create a very stable and prosperous trading relationship in East Asia. That requires rule of law, legally bound commitments, and very low trade barriers in East Asia. If we use Korea-US FTA as a model for that, we believe we will be able to get closer to that goal. Some folks in China and also in Korea argue that we should have our own style of agreement in East Asia, giving basically a lot of exemptions to sensitive sectors and less legally binding legal framework. There will be discussions back and forth which way we should take, because that's more realistic in East Asia now. But the intention or a long-term goal of Korea's trade policy is to use Korea-US FTA as a sort of template for the standards they would like to reach in East Asian trading environment as well.
Thanks.
Very interesting. Let's go over here. Yes, sir.
So you talk about all this wonderful news of removing trade barriers, moving tariffs, and behind-the-border regulations, and I just find myself wondering, why are they there in the first place? Like, whose mistake are we correcting?
The trade barriers.
Good question.
The trade barriers, why they're there?
Why do they, if they need to be removed, why were they there in the first place?
Right. That's a pretty good question. You have studied history of trade policies, and you have seen infant industry argument from the early 20th century, and you have also seen what is called Smoot-Hawley Act of the 1929 in the United States, why the United States had to impose a lot of tariffs on imports after the Great Depression hit the U.S. economy. There's always arguments that infant industry must be protected, at least at the initial stage of industrial development. And then when they're ready to compete, then we can gradually remove tariffs. That probably has happened to Korea's economic development history as well. Earlier, we did not have industrial base at all. And then we tried to develop our own industrial base by bringing technology, financial resources, and also at the same time providing certain protection to our industry. But if you reach a certain point of time, then you need to really liberalize your economy and move beyond that. Because unless you really expose yourself to more competition, you cannot really develop yourself further from it. So in our Korean government way of thinking, we have reached that part in later 1980s. And then since then, we have been deliberately liberalizing our economy. FTA is our most recent efforts, but in the past, we had other kinds of initiatives, and that's where we are.
Council, I want to thank you for your talk Paul. Senator Paul, I have a great interest in the Korean economy. Like over time, especially after Mr. Goldman placed it, like he's the inventor of the BRIC countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and he placed Indonesia, Mexico, and Korea also on the list right now. And I've had the honor to have the dinner with Consular Won-kyong Kim, the General Consular of Korea and Saudi Arabia, over this break. And he commented on the amount of students, Korean students studying in Europe, the US, and abroad. Do you think this would have a positive impact on Korea in the long term? Or would it change the mentality of doing business in Korea? Like, how do you see the impact of this in the long term Korea?
I think it's absolutely positive. And also, not just positive, but these Korean students studying abroad are going to be our access to the world and our basis for economic and cultural development in the future. Because as you are exposed to society, culture, economic system which are different from yours, that really stimulates your brain. And of course, you know, if you are studying in the United States, for example, you're learning all the more advanced knowledge and technology and know-how. So these are going to hopefully come back to Korea and contribute to the development of the Korean economy. So we, a lot of times, boast that we have more students studying abroad than any other country in the world compared to our population. Our students are studying in the United States at the range of 200,000. Yeah, and that's second to Chinese students studying in the United States. But if you compare our population to Chinese population, you can see how many, you know, the big portion of the Korean students are studying abroad, and that's I think that's going to be really a big boost for Korea's future. And you know, I talk a lot with my Japanese colleagues. You can see a huge difference between Japan and Korea in that respect as well. So Japanese students are, at the current moment, are not willing to go abroad and study, while Korean students want to go abroad and study. And we sometimes, with my Japanese friends, talk about what kind of impact this is going to have on those countries' future. And I firmly believe that we're going to benefit a lot from having these students studying.
That's something I totally agree with. Boston University is, as you know, is just dedicated to globalization, international exchanges. I think we have something in the range of 600 Korean students here at Boston University. It's a lot. You didn't mention that in your export list, but we do appreciate those. And of course, we send a lot of BU students. I know in the IR department, we send at least 40% of our students abroad to study in one of our programs. We just take this international exposure as absolutely essential in preparing students for the world in the future. Absolutely essential. So if any of you have not been on study abroad yet, this is a brief advertisement. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Counselor, I have a question for you. As you mentioned before, the trade barriers are set up usually to protect infant industries. I was wondering if the trade barriers are put off, I was wondering how that will impact the domestic industry, I guess. Will they be ready for the change, I guess?
That's a sensitive question, and that is actually more sensitive in the political sense than industrial sense. We believe that most of our industries are ready to compete, and that's the way to promote our competitiveness. But in the political sector, that cannot be the case, because you always want to have more stable, comfortable environment instead of being driven to more competition. So our policy goal is to create an environment where our industrial competitiveness becomes enhanced, and that essentially needs to make a breakthrough in our political sector. And if you take a look at the tariff phase-out schedule, that's included in the FTA, you can see for industrial products, tariffs on certain products are gone immediately. Immediately meaning upon entry into force of the agreement. Certain products are subject to up to 10 years transition period. So those tariffs on those products are going to be phased out annually, bit by bit, so that we can give some kind of transition period to those industries so that they can make adjustments themselves. So that's also included in the agreement.
One final question, Ms. Ho?
Here on the slides, it's slides from impact growth estimates. The President Obama said that KORUS-FTA was for at least 70,000 American jobs. But I'd like to know how many job creation were in Korea, and if there was a job creation, then was the job creation really suitable for the Korean workers, that they were really able to take the American jobs for created in Korea? If not, how they can be sold?
In 2007, 11 Korean research institutions did a joint project to calculate the impact of the Korea-US FTA. And at the time, the conclusion was that the agreement will create 340,000 jobs in Korea. But these calculations, you have to understand, is based upon economic model. And a lot of assumptions and the data are not really totally reflective of the realities. So this is just the guidance I would suggest. Of course, these, we need these concrete numbers to give to the people some ideas about what's going to happen. But I would suggest that you should not really totally rely on these numbers. But that's the number that we created. 340,000 jobs we created for Korea. But that is based upon the assumption that the agreement is going to enhance productivity in the Korean industries and will create 6% of GDP growth. So if you consider that as a definitive number and want to compare with 70,000 job creation in the United States, that's misleading. The jobs being created here is not really taking somebody's job away 2 years. The benefit of trade, of course, comes from relative competitiveness. We have studied Ricardo, and when we have more trade, the United States industry is going to focus more on the areas where you have more competitiveness. And Korean industries sort of move away from the areas where Korean industries are not really that competitive, but move on to areas where Koreans can be more competitive. So these kind of reallocation of resources create the jobs. So jobs can be created both in Korea and the United States. And after that happens, we can really look outward. It's not just about bilateral trade. These kind of new reallocation of the resources and enhanced competitiveness can create more strategic alliance between the two industries. And the two countries' industries can look outward toward all the other countries and export more and be more competitive, create jobs.
Well, thank you very much. I hope everybody will join me in thanking Consular Kim and Mr. Connell for really very stimulating and interesting talks. And then join us for lunch in the other room. Thank you very much.